Welcome to Survey Booker Sessions. Tune in to hear from people working in a range of industries and roles to provide you ideas that you can take away and use in your own business. I'm your host Matt Nally, the founder and director of Survey Booker, which is the leading CRM and survey management system for surveyors. On this week's episode, we have Christine from the RICS, so thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Matt.
Not a problem. Do you want to introduce yourself and what your role is?
Yeah, so I am responsible at RICS for professional conduct standards and also for regulatory policy. So the standards that we set, which aren't about sort of technical surveying, and then also, how we regulate, who we regulate, those sorts of questions.
Awesome. I think there's some quite interesting topics we're going to come on to today across what professional conduct is and ADR and all that type of stuff. For this first topic, should we start with what's the key one? What is professional conduct? What does that mean at the RICS?
So I think we talk a lot in RICS about what it means to be a professional. And I think it's one of those words that we chuck around a lot. But when you talk to the public in particular about what they think a professional is, they talk about things like competence. They talk about things like uh, public interest and knowing that someone kind of has the interests of the client, but also a kind of wider public role. And they talk about sort of honesty and integrity and trust, words like that. So those are the kinds of things that we think about when we talk about professional conduct. So they are, how do you interact with people? How do you interact with the world? And we incorporate that in our rules of conduct. And the rules of conduct are, none of them are going to be kind of things that anyone is not expecting. They talk about things like being honest, following professional standards, providing a good service to clients, making sure that you're not doing harm, respecting people, and being inclusive, and also maintaining and working within your competence. So in broad terms, that's what we mean by professional conduct.
Okay, that makes sense. So are there certain areas that people accidentally fall down on that they might not mean to? Like the competence one, perhaps might be a more obvious one in terms of doing some work where it might be on the edge of your skill set without realizing, or or do
Yeah,
people generally get that bit right and other bits fall down?
I think it can be challenging, and I think it's particularly challenging, of course, in the kind of business environment we have now, where um, you know money is very tight for everybody. People are um, having to find perhaps new ways of offering services. Um, New tech and AI is coming in, and people are having to work out, how do they use that, and how do they do that ethically and professionally. Um, but yeah, one of the areas that definitely, I think there are probably a couple of areas. One is competence. One is, being asked to do a new area of work, and that's fine. All of us need to move into new areas of work, but it's making sure you do it with some appropriate training, maybe some support from somebody else who already does that work, but also making sure that you're not, you know, that, that you're not doing those things which are kind of fundamental, like moving really outside your area of expertise or doing something that you don't know how to do. One of the classic areas that we get is geographical knowledge. So particularly for people who are doing kind of home surveys and things, it's really important that you know the area that you're surveying in, because different geographical areas have different challenges and things that people have to know to be able to do that job competently. Um, so you need to make sure that you're up to date with all of those things. And the other thing where people sometimes fall down is customer service. Um, it can get very easy when you are busy doing the day job to remember that you're dealing with someone who maybe doesn't know what your day job involves. And we all know that as we're doing work, things can change, unexpected things can come up that maybe might change the price that you need to charge for something, or might change timescales, things like that. And it's very easy for people to forget to tell their client that those things have changed, or to have discussions with their client about what they want in those changed circumstances. And that's sometimes another thing we see where people perhaps inadvertently, because they're busy, because they don't think the same way that their client does, just fall down on professional conduct.
That's very interesting, and it's I think it falls into that making sure you've got the same understanding around something as well, because it's very easy to have a
Yeah,
conversation with a customer and you think you've both understood the same thing,
yeah,
and sometimes it's not until you put it back in writing and someone can go, "Oh no, we're both looking at this from a slightly different angle,"
yeah.
and that's not going to achieve what I wanted. So, yeah, it's always good to follow up, I think, and put those things down on paper so it's easier to make sure we've got a shared one a record as well of what you've
Yeah,
agreed.
definitely. And,
Um,
and that becomes really helpful later. We're going to talk a little bit about complaints, but of course it's not the reason to do it. Like you say, the reason to do it is to make sure that you've understood and you can solve problems before they happen. But if something does happen later, having something in writing is really valuable to us as a regulator, to anyone that's looking at that complaint later.
Are there challenges with keeping up to date with new rules and regulations? Do you find most people are able to keep up to speed with what changes that might be getting implemented, or is that an area where I don't know, people maybe fall behind? They don't see the email, or they're busy. They still think we'll read it later and forget.
Yeah,
Um,
completely. And it's a challenge for all of us, isn't it? I mean, the world moves so fast and there is so much communication coming at you so
yeah,
fast. Um, we try to, so when we are putting out new standards or we're changing something, we communicate with members. There's an all profession email that goes out that will usually give people information about changes that are happening. We also have an RICS newsletter on LinkedIn. So if you're connected to us on LinkedIn, you can follow that. And again, that will give notice about changes that are coming up. Um, we have something called the My RICS community. So if you're an RICS member, if you join that, again, we'll usually post on there when we're changing something. And the other thing, outside RICS, um, for particular areas of work, most government website pages will have something that you can log on to, that you can ask to be, have a weekly email about what's changing on that page, or new legislation that's coming in. um, and things like LinkedIn and the press, trade press, are obviously really important. But I completely sympathise with people. I think it is very difficult to keep up to date with things. But I would definitely recommend sort of the LinkedIn newsletter and my RICS community if you struggle with making sure that you're seeing emails coming in, because that's a sort of weekly thing where we put things into a digest for people.
yeah, that's nice. That's the thing to get, isn't it? The the headline bit, so you can understand what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Are there, this is not something actually we sort of looked at beforehand, but are there what's the process behind how professional conduct rules are put together? Is that driven by I don't know, like government regulations or the public or the
It can be driven
surveyors
by
themselves?
all of those things. Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's government legislation. So obviously, there's been a lot of changes in things like building safety and things like that. So we have changed and issued standards based on that. Some of it is to do with complaints that we get in, and other is driven by the profession itself telling us that there's something where they want more guidance or they want more clarity. And obviously, the new professional group panels that are being set up at the moment will have a really important role in providing that insight and feedback into my colleagues who work on technical standards in particular. But we also use it for our kind of for our conduct standards as well. So, for example, we're looking next year to address two big issues. One is anti-money laundering, where we already have a standard, but of course it's an area that continues to be really high profile and important for our firms, especially those ones who are working in, supervised sectors. So we're going to update our standards on that next year, and we're also looking to draft a standard on use of technology and AI, a sort of overarching standard that is about kind of how you use those responsibly, as opposed to the those pieces that are about technically, what technology might you use for a particular area of surveying.
It's actually interestingly going to be my next question, and obviously we're a tech platform. I'm not trying to push our platform specifically, but is there a changing role in how tech can support with professional conduct? And are there things to be wary of? Because I think one of the discussions we've been having is what's suitable or appropriate, sorry, to automate and what's not. For example, if we're pulling data from somewhere, um, it's good to be able to automate in terms of speed of getting it, but you don't want to then bypass the analysis process and verifying the data is correct. So, are there, yeah, I suppose, what's the role do you think for tech in the future? Because you mentioned obviously the AI aspects and other bits.
I think I think it's really important that tech providers and professionals work together to kind of build a common knowledge about what's important for each of them. So it's going to be completely crucial for professionals to build their knowledge and understanding about how things like AI work,
Mm,
so that they can ask the right questions of tech providers. It's going to be really important for tech providers to understand that for a professional, um, they have a really important liability to their customer in terms of how they use those tech platforms, those AI solutions, things like that. And there's obviously ways in which, tech will transform and improve the service that people can give to their clients. But that's really important that that's done in a way where, you can be sure about that the data set being used is accurate and people have the rights to use it. That
mm,
where you're using confidential client data, that's not going outside those bounds of what's confidential, the bounds of the firm, and that contracts properly provide for that. Um, that you are transparent with your client about what is being done by AI or technology,
mm,
and then what's being checked, and that at the end of the day, there's always a human element, isn't there? You know, I don't think there's ever going to be a situation in which you can just take a technology product and give it to a client and think that that's doing a professional job, because
no.
they're tools, aren't they? They're like all other tools, and what you need to do is use them where that's the appropriate thing to do, but then add your expertise, your understanding, your ability to check what's coming out of those AI or technology solutions to make sure that that's right for the client, and accurate and all of those other things. So I think it's really important, and it's important that we work together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure kind of Andrew Knight, who
Yes.
runs our tech partner program, and that's something that he does an enormous amount of, helping tech firms to understand surveyors and helping surveyors to understand tech firms.
Yeah, we were lucky to go to the Tech Partner Conference recently, so that was yeah, it was good to have those discussions.
Yeah,
But I think you're right. It's a challenge. It's for surveyors as well as, well, for surveyors the challenge is ultimately understanding what the technology is doing, where the data's stored, how it's processing things, where the data's from. I agree with you on that. From a supplier perspective, it's really understanding the needs of what you automate in the right ways in order for it to be beneficial rather than a liability. So you don't miss out that analysis step. You've got to make sure that doesn't become, certain things don't become too easy, so that you miss steps out, I think. Um, so yeah, some interesting challenges, I think, around that. Um,
definitely.
I suppose my final question on this side of things, in terms of what's professional conduct, are there common pitfalls that you see people go through that are very easy to avoid, um, around this bit, so they can, so surveyors can get the professional conduct bit much more effective, I suppose.
I think that there are probably two things that I would always suggest to somebody that they do, where they're not sure about what the right thing to do is, or they've got a difficult question, because sometimes professional conduct questions can be really difficult. You might have a tension between what your client wants you to do and what it's reasonable to do. You'll want to keep your client happy, because we all want to keep our clients happy, we all want to keep the people that we work for happy. But you might have other tensions about whether that's the right thing to do. um, and I would say always involve somebody else that you trust in that conversation. I think
Mm,
that, where you've got something where you're not sure, and listen to your gut to tell you whether you're not sure about something as well. Um, it gets very easy, I think. I've seen lots of, for example, conflicts of interest cases where somebody recognised that there might be a conflict of interest, but then the fact that it's very difficult to turn down work, it's very difficult to go to a client who maybe you've worked for a long time and say, no, actually, I can't do this work for you. And so you find ways to kind of convince yourself that
Mhm.
actually it's not as serious as you thought, or it's okay, you can probably carry on and do it anyway. And I think involving somebody external in that can sometimes just help with avoiding that tendency to kind of be a bit over optimistic about what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And the other is the thing that we spoke about before, which is, write things down. If you're not sure about what to do, um, on our website, we've got a kind of ethics like flow chart that you can go through, which is questions that you can work through to say, actually, do I have enough information about this? Do I know what the standards say about it? You know, what are the rights and the interests that are engaged here? How can I, what options do I have? And if you do all of that and you write it down, when you make a decision at the end, having used that process, even if somebody later thinks that maybe that was the wrong thing to do, you can show that you've been professional about it. You
Yeah.
can show that what you've done is really thought about it and tried to do the right thing. And that's really, in the end, all we can do.
Yeah, that's a very nice point, actually, and it's good to have something to reference back to, particularly if you're worrying about it, because you might not be thinking quite as logically and rationally at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it helps you to step back and reflect. I think the only other thing I'd add to that, which I think probably comes in with what you said anyway, is just taking time as well. Don't feel rushed to make that decision.
Yeah.
And if you're being rushed, then it probably again is a sign of not the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, it's often a reason for concern, isn't it? If you feel like someone's putting you under a great deal of pressure when you're expressing, concerns about something.